So before I talk about what I've written, let me just give you a bit of background. Um, Countries try to get better market access by getting preferential tariff rates, right? But for that, they have to negotiate, and it takes up to 2 years, 3 years, sometimes longer to be able to get those terms. In order to get those terms, each country takes care of or wants to ensure that their own market, their own manufacturing will not be affected, but that they would be able to access the other country's market at a preferential rate. But it would only work really if the receiving country also gets an advantage in the sense that the goods that are coming ostensibly, duty free or at a reduced duty are competitive with the alternative sourcing, centers of the world. And likewise, when it is exporting, it has the capability to compete with the other sources of supplies into the counterparty. So that's basically the principle of a free trade agreement. But even actually, before you talk about a free trade agreement, one of the things that we need to contend with is that if it takes 2 years or 3 years to negotiate, how come suddenly India has, entered into a major trade deal with the EU? In July, it entered into a trade agreement with a very similar trade agreement with the United Kingdom. Is also recently signed up an agreement with New Zealand, with Oman, and there's a bit of haste in trying to get these preferential terms. And this is really triggered by the tariffs that the President Trump has imposed on various countries. In the case of India, until last night, they were subject to 50% tariff because of the fact that they were importing petroleum products from Russia. Of course, as part of this agreement, they've agreed to let go, and for that reason, President Trump has been very generous in giving 18% tariff. Bear in mind that Pakistan's tariff rate is 19%. Now, between 18 and 19, there isn't a huge amount of difference, but it's more symbolic, I think. I think President Trump is trying to make up, perhaps, for the period where India was subject to 50% tariff, and perhaps in the case of Pakistan, it may come down too. So the point I'm trying to make is that the haste with which countries, particularly countries like India, are looking for markets, and that's also applies equally to China, which is one of the major suppliers to the US. They're also looking around for markets, except it's a lot easier for China to get those markets because China is the factory of the world. So they are by and large able to offer products at a very competitive rate anyway. On top of that, if they can also get a duty preference, that really helps. Now, in the discussion on the EU-India deal, I think, in the context of Pakistan and India, it will probably be better if we don't just limit ourselves to the EU-India deal, but we'll take EU and UK India deal and compare that with Pakistan. Because as you know, until Brexit, the GSP zero rated or mostly zero rated entry was available to Pakistan. Post Brexit, what United Kingdom did was to replace it with another scheme, which is called the Developing Countries Trading Scheme. It is very similar to GSP Plus in terms of the tariff impact. Of course, it is softer in terms of the requirements to accord to conventions on labor, environment, freedom of press, and so on. It's a bit softer there in the case of UK. But the net result in terms of tariff is the same. Okay, so what India has achieved by signing both these agreements is effectively to get duty-free access to its primary export, which is textiles, at least primary exports that are our competitors, Pakistan's competitors. And therefore, India would now enjoy anywhere between 10 to 12% advantage in both those countries. Why should that be a concern to Pakistan? Well, a number of reasons. First of all, Pakistan is hugely reliant on both those, the trading bloc EU and of course UK. If you put them together, they represent about 35% of our total exports to the world. As a single country, USA is the most important. But if you take even EU on its own, but if you take certainly EU and UK together, they become 35% of the total. So it is very significant from our point of view that we preserve this market, right? The second reason why it should be of a concern to us is that when we look at our primary exports, which are textile products, there's a bit of leather, there's a bit of cereals, but mostly it is dominated by textiles to the extent of 75, percent plus. India and Pakistan was exporting roughly the same, despite the fact that we had the duty-free access and India did not have it. India was suffering duties at the rate of 10 to 12%. We had that advantage, right? Now, they will have that advantage too. So in fact, if anything, we are, that much at a disadvantage, in relative to India. Now, why weren't we selling significantly more when we had the 10 to 12% advantage on the tariffs? And the simple reason is that our cost of production, on account of the high energy costs, was and is still higher. And our taxation regime was not as friendly as the Indian tax regime and perhaps some of the other tax regimes, whether you look at Vietnam or you look at Bangladesh. The third reason was that our quality was perhaps not the same either, right? So that's nothing to do with the government of Pakistan. It is really up to the industry and to our exporters to get that right. Yeah. So these were a number of reasons why we were not able to sell significantly more than perhaps what we were doing. So broadly speaking, give or take, 10%, India and Pakistan were selling about the same in terms of value to UK and EU put together, right? And now, of course, they would have an advantage. As you know, recently, just 3 days ago, the Prime Minister has announced certain, reduction in the energy cost. He's announced a reduction in the refinance cost. And so all that should help, but we can come to that in a minute. So I'll just stop at that, and perhaps has that given you a reasonable background of the importance of EU and the UK? Okay, so first of all, it's the size. As I said, the two put together is about 35%. So $1 out of every $3 that we earn really comes from there. So it has to be very important to us. Secondly, we've been in that market for the longest time, so we know the market. Yeah, we know who the customers are. The customers know us, and then so that also creates a bonding. And of course, the flip side of that is that it perhaps creates over-reliance on the duty preference, etc., that we were enjoying. So that's the downside. But on the positive side, we've got familiar with the market. We know what the market wants. And we've created a niche for ourselves, which as I mentioned, or as I implied earlier, we are really by and large competing at the low end. We're not competing at the very high value added. Now, within value added, of course, there's the low end, there's the middle end, and of course, there's the top end. We're not really at the top end. We are somewhat at the middle, but mostly verging towards the bottom end. So we had created a niche for our products. And so it was, for that reason, is very important. Of course, in terms of spending power also, perhaps it doesn't have the same spending power as USA, where we sell about $5.5 billion, mostly again of textiles. But after USA, UK and European Union are also very affluent parts of the world. So that makes it also very important. Why are we over-reliant on USA and UK and USA? I think the reason again is that our bigger exporters, and for that matter, all exporters, but particularly the bigger exporters, are very comfortable dealing with the customers there. The credit risk is very low because we've been dealing with them, we've got to know them, we know how they operate, so we get paid. There are parts of the world geography which are under address, so Africa being one of the primary ones, Latin America would be another one. These are the countries where we have not really focused so much, but Africa is not an easy continent to do business in. India has an advantage because of the diaspora. Indian diaspora is present there, so they act as the importers, and then they outsell or they sell out to the local customers there. Pakistan does not quite enjoy that advantage. So this is the reason why we are very reliant on these markets. Okay, so first of all, of course, the basic the premise of GSP plus in the context of EU is that Pakistan has to meet the conventions that EU has prescribed. Yeah, there are several of these conventions. They are mostly in the ambit of environment, labor, freedom of the press, freedom of journalism, law and order, the justice system. So all these things have not traditionally been very easy for Pakistan to accord to, but somehow or the other we have managed in the past. Yeah. So I think the first hope is that we continue to do that, because this is coming up for renewal next year. And so it is very vital that we actually preserve that duty-free access. Now, if we lose that duty-free access and India gets it, then I think we will not be able to continue to sell as much as we do. The reason why I say we will not continue to sell as much as we've done is that customers generally don't put all their eggs into one basket. Yeah? So it's unlikely that Pakistan would ever lose 100% of whatever we've been selling to these markets. We could lose 1.5 billion worth, we could lose 2 billion worth, we could lose a little bit more out of the 9, 10, 11 billion that we sell to these markets. So I think that's one of the reasons why, the primary reason which really the government has to assure the EU that we would be by and large make progress on meeting the EU prescribed prescriptions, the conventions, sorry. Which are by and large very consistent with the UN conventions also. So it's not something that EU has pulled out of the hat. So I think that's very important that we do that. There are a number of other measures that we need to take, but we can talk about them. Okay, so look, first of all, our cost of production is higher than India for a variety of reasons. The two principal ones are energy. Yeah. Now, in the value chain to value-added products, which is what our destination market is, or a destination product profile is, you have to start from cotton, and then you convert the cotton into yarn, then into cloth, then you dye it, and then you make apparel out of that, right? Now, until you get to the apparel stage, it is very energy intensive. Yeah, it takes a lot of energy to convert this. It's not so much labor reliant; it is more energy reliant. It becomes more labor reliant when it comes to the value-added garment making, right? So first of all, so therefore our energy cost is higher than India. Secondly, our cost of labor, although on nominally speaking may actually be lower, but our productivity rate is significantly lower than India. So if you adjust it for the productivity, our net and labor cost is actually higher. Yeah, our skill levels are not quite up to the standard of India. So I think that is one of the major things. Our taxation I've spoken about. The exporters currently have to pay the higher of 1% minimum tax on turnover, or 29% of their profit, which is under the normal tax regime. In addition, they have to also pay advance tax, which of course they can recover, but takes a lot of time to recover that. The medium-sized businesses in Pakistan are unable to compete with alternative suppliers of products, because they have to buy more expensive man-made fibers, which are made locally, but they are at a higher cost because that is protected. Yeah, so I think that needs to change. Then within the export facilitation scheme, earlier the exporters could claim back all the duties and taxes, but this EFS scheme was changed last year, and so they're unable to claim back all the import duty. So that is an impediment. I mean, no country of the world, disallows import of or refund of import duty. I think last but not the least, versus India, the Indian exchange rate has depreciated by 5 or 6% in the last sort of 6-8 months. Yeah, Pakistan's exchange rate has been either stable or slightly appreciated. So there's another 6 or 7% void that is coming that is making Pakistani exports uncompetitive. So I think these are the major changes that need to take place. I think what I'd like to say is that the announcements that the Prime Minister made on reducing the energy cost, reducing the cost of refinance for exporters, those are all very welcome, and I'm sure they are very appreciated and will be appreciated by industry, but they are still not. They don't go all the way, right? I think it would have been a much better if a very comprehensive benchmarking was done with all the costs and the taxation and all the other levies, with the alternative, particularly with India, but also with Bangladesh and with Vietnam, and a comprehensive package was developed. Because these things, when you do them piecemeal, they lose the effect. I think when they're done comprehensively together in an integrated form, they have the maximum impact. So I'm hoping that before the budget comes or as part of the budget, this exercise will be done. And I think that should help Pakistan maintain a significant part of the EU and the UK market share.